Hey, good evening, everyone. It's been a while since Speaker's Corner UK channel is at a video. For those who don't know, I live well over 200 miles away from Speaker's Corner now. So unfortunately, I don't get down there anymore to do videos or to interact with people. So more of that is done now online, StreamYard Hangouts like we're having now, or on Discord or elsewhere. And for this evening, I'd like to welcome my gin and tonic co-host, Stop Spamming. Stops, good evening. How are you, sir?
Hi, well, yeah, and I live 200,000 miles away from Speaker's Corner, so there's not a chance for me to go there. So this is the way that it'll just have to be. The other thing is that you'll only see my logo, the kafir, because that's what I am, but not my face or anything. I know people would love to see my beautiful face, but that's I'm not even sure if it's going to be permanent or if one day I'm going to just buy a camera. But at the moment, I'm still going to stay only as a background voice.
You're as mysterious as Christian Prince. It's like everybody wants to know who Stops is, right? You're the infamous undercover agent there. So, yeah, we'll look forward to that if that ever happens. And if you're 200,000 miles away, then you're probably somewhere close to the moon. So that would be an extreme feat of technological marvel to join us. So thanks for coming on as well.
Well, that explains the 1 second delay every time. Hey,
exactly.
How did you know about this?
Anybody that subscribed to the Speakers Corner UK channel will get notified of live stream, or if they happen to be browsing, it'll be at the top of the sub as well. So if you are watching, subscribe to the channel because that'll let you know that we're live, and it'll appear at the top of your subscription. So we thought we'd do. I've been on Hangouts over the last week, on and off, mostly on rather than off, and had a chat to many different people on different topics. Obviously, religion and Islam in particular is the one that a lot of notice of, and Stops has got a lot of experience. And we run the Gin and Tonic Show, which will be starting again in the beginning of February. So watch out for that. We'll be putting up some more details about that coming shortly. But what I thought we'd do for a change, just randomly, because Stops and I both had time. Some of my family are out, so that allows me to sit in the office, which is and I can then run it with a decent studio setup. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. So the topic is atheism false, and does the Quran show this? So there's kind of two propositions there. So Stops, what's your thoughts to get us started?
Well, to get us started, I think it's always a good idea to, just define our terms. I've got a huge problem with this word atheism, okay? Because if I don't believe that dragons exist, do I participate in the activity of a dragonism? I don't think so. So I don't think that not believing something can ever be an ism. Because to be an ism, it needs to be, following something or with a goal. I don't have a goal. I don't have it. I just don't bloody believe it. So there's no ism here. And I hate the term atheist because there's a lot of baggage attached to it. So the way that it works is just that there's no good reason to believe God exists, so I don't. End of story. It has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with has something bad happened to me as a child. None of that applies. It's just that I see no good reason, so I don't. And that's it. So is atheism false? Yes, atheism is false because it doesn't exist. So if I look at the term, can a non-belief in a God be false? Well, then for me, the answer is no. Because it only becomes false, or it becomes something that is not true any longer, if someone can demonstrate the existence of a God. Then it falls away automatically without me doing anything. I don't have to go worship. I don't have to go do anything. The whole concept of being an atheist, in other words, rejecting the claims made by theists and simply not accepting that gods exist for some reason, this falls away as soon as a God appears. So the only way that you can falsify it is by demonstrating a God. Now, does that mean if I go and take the Quran, that the status or the I don't know, it's not a status, it's not a position, it's not anything, it's not it's just a non-belief. Does this fall away if I read the Quran? Well, yeah, sure, if I accept it, because that means the Quran, because it was allegedly written by a God, if I accept the Quran, then I am accepting that it was written by God. So this is my definition. This is my attempt at clarifying this.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty. For me, atheism, I use the ism. I know you don't like it because other people do. I mean, I don't go around, I'm an atheist today or anything like that. I do not believe a God exists, as opposed to I lack a belief. So I'm of the view, there's these sort of two positions. I'm of the view that I do not believe a God exists. Certainly the gods that have been put forward to me, I reject the claim, i.e. I dismiss the claim. And there's a difference between and making an epistemic position of certainty or knowledge. For example, I know the God does not exist, or I'm certain the God does not exist. I'm not necessarily in that position. So for me, I do not believe that the God propositions that have been postulated to me, in particular, because that's the main two that you and I have had familiarity with, is Christianity and Islam. But I also have as the default position that I do not believe that a God or gods exist. So anything else, even that I haven't heard of, I'm at the position of I do not believe the claim until there's good reason to do so. It's not the position that I'm undecided. And undecided would be, okay, I've heard arguments, in my view, and from what I've heard for other people, I've heard arguments and I cannot make up my mind. I'm literally sitting on the fence. But I think if you haven't heard an extraordinary claim, the default position for me is I do not believe the claim. I start from a point of I do not believe this claim is true. So I am a claimist, for want of a better word, especially extraordinary claims.
Okay.
So I think, well, obviously, particularly in Islam, because obviously we talk to quite a few Muslims. I've obviously seen more of an idea of Muslims trying to, quote unquote, challenge, attack, defeat atheism, because they recognize, I think the power of atheism now, especially with so many ex-Muslims, and the trend and the wave is continuing. And I'm sure you've seen that as well, Stop. So we've seen this sort of thing of there's a challenge against atheism, and conflate atheism as a worldview. Atheism, as you know, and I'm sure you'd agree, is the proposition against the God claim. Whatever else there is, we could disagree, and we do. You and I disagree on a few things. We agree on others. But all it tells you is that you do not believe in a God. Now, there are a few other entailments. Obviously, you don't believe in an objective morality, the lawgiver. But outside of that, I mean, there's many other things that we could differ on. So there's a lot to ask an atheist. What do you believe? Are you a naturalist? Are you something else? But don't assume that all atheists are the same, or that atheism is a worldview. Naturalism could be a worldview. I believe that everything that exists is natural, and there's a lot of entailments around that. But atheism is naturalism. I see that conflated a lot. As Stop says, there any Muslims wanting to join, please message us. I've put it into the chat. I'll put it in again. It's in the bottom of the video as well. So the video description will have that link. So if you want to join us, make sure you've got a mic. Anybody's welcome to join us. Thank you so much. Analyze Dunya. Thanks to everybody for saying hi on the chat there. So I guess, obviously, is atheism false? Well, obviously, Stops and I don't think so. And if you're an atheist, I assume at this stage you don't think so either. But the bigger question, obviously, for us is, does the Quran show this? I.e., could there be anything true about the Quran, especially given what we understand today? So, Stops, what's your thoughts on the Quran in the modern world?
Well, the thing is that I cannot see anything in the Quran that would improve my life today. And this is quite funny, that if I ask a Muslim, can you do this? Can you present something to me that, why would the Quran improve my life? There is nothing that they can bring up. Like what I heard today is somebody say, well, you have the, what would you call it? All the social and all those things. Yeah, but that's not in the Quran. This is people. I'm not saying I can't see any people, any Muslims being nice people. I'm just asking, is there anything in the Quran, in Islam, that improves my life? And I cannot see anything. Now, this is regardless of whether I'm an atheist or something. I cannot see Bible, Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Nana Guru, blah, blah, blah. I cannot see any of those things improving my life today. They all make claims regarding the afterlife. They all make claims saying, well, later on, when you're dead, then it's going to be beneficial if you are a Muslim. That may well be. I do not know. But at the moment, there's nothing that I see in any of the books that would improve my life.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? And it's the kind of challenge that Hitchens put out, and I'm sure he wasn't the first, but he's one that popularized it. We can apply it to the Quran in the sense of, like, name me something in the Quran that is unique to the Quran that somebody who's a non-Muslim does not have access to, that is morally good. Because you can point out things that we already believe, or things that are in line with science, although perhaps less of them, or you could point out things that obviously everybody knows is true, or they knew before the Quran. But is there something unique in the Quran that you have access to as a Muslim that gives you some moral value that a non-Muslim does not have? And by moral value, I mean that we would all agree is morally good, that you as a Muslim can point to and go, look, this X, and I go, wow, that's a moral thing. Do you know what? As a non-Muslim, I do not have access to that. And if you have, that would be interesting to talk about. But again, if you're a Muslim and you're joining us, then feel free to join us on the panel. The link is in the description of the video. I'm also posting the link here. You're welcome to come and join us. Really, what we're interested in is why are you a Muslim, and what are the reasons for it? Obviously, you're a Muslim, but what do you believe and why? Obviously, you'd believe in a form of Islam, and we were on a panel today. I think Stops at least was having an interesting chat there, and there were a whole bunch of different Muslims, and some of them were sort of, in a sense, attacking each other. So even within Islam, there's a bit, well. Yeah.
And the thing, how does your view of the Quran and of Islam, in what way does that in any way, or what do you think why it does falsify the non-belief atheists, or atheism, if I accept this term now?
Yeah, I suppose if I play devil's advocate, or certain Muslims at least, until we get somebody that wants to join us here, is something like, well, one of the things would be, hey, you can't have objective morals as an atheist. You guys just are matter in motion. You don't have to believe anything. And at a reductionist, I think, uncharitable level, you can say we're molecules in motion. But remember, that's a very reductionist, uncharitable view, because these molecules in motion, which are us, have got us to the moon, have got us to the moon. They've done Beethoven, Mozart, all of the things that no other creature on this planet has remotely got close to doing. So these special, I would suggest, molecules in motion, let's call us humans rather than reductionist view, is very unique. So that's all very well saying molecules in motion, but that's just a deflationary term to make it sound that, we can't give up, we aren't something unique and special.
The other thing I hear a lot is that we don't have a purpose. We are not bound by anything. In other words, we're just going for the, I don't know, for the life as such, that we worship money and greed and sex and all sorts of things. Now, the funny thing is that a Muslim and if I speak for myself, we have a lot in common. In other words, when an elderly lady in front of us happens to trip or something, we will both go and help her. If somebody drops their wallet in front of us, we will pick it up and give it back to the guy. So there's a lot of things that we do that are absolutely identical. The only difference comes in when it comes to the grounding of this, where I say this comes from within me, my personality, and the way that I was, raised. And the Muslim will say, well, this is built into me because of God. This is the huge difference that we have. But other than that, the consequences remain the same. And then, of course, what I notice is that Muslims spend an inordinate amount of time talking about Islam. Now, I don't talk about me not having a God belief. Like during the week, if I'm not interested in Islam, I don't care. I don't wake up in the morning and think, oh goodness, there's no God, there's no God. I don't think about this. So I don't have this obsession that theists seem to have with their belief, because they think about this and they talk about this constantly, and I don't. So what is it that gives me purpose? Well, it's me. Because I have a life where I maintain, if I am on this planet, I am improving this planet. I'm improving the level of knowledge of others. I'm improving, the income of people. I'm increasing the level of well-being of the population. Now, I also donate money to others. I try and further education where I can. So on the whole, I am not somebody who leeches off the resources, but I try and give back. Now, otherwise, a toaster has a purpose, not a person. A toaster has a purpose, and that is to, I don't know, make bread brown. But this is a purpose that has been assigned to that toaster. I don't think a human being can have a purpose. This is what they make of their lives. And some people say, well, my purpose is, or what I would like to do for the rest of my life is to just go and worship some God. Okay, if that's what they see as their purpose, then they must do so. But I don't look down on anybody who thinks differently or has a different view on this.
Yeah, I think the theist argument is, hey, if there's a creator, then there's a purpose. So he's created this purpose for us, and it gives them, I guess, some comfort. Whereas they point to us and say, you guys don't have a purpose, and as you've quite, we give our lives our own purpose. The fact that there isn't a cosmic purpose doesn't mean that we don't have our own purpose. And it is true that, in a sense, ultimately, in the this is something that William Lane Craig says, well, ultimately, in the heat death of the universe, it won't matter that humans have ever lived. Well, if you're going to, again, take that sort of, I would suggest, charitable view, well, that's fine then. But while we do live, and while there's animals, then we can feel pain and we can feel pleasure, and we can try and make the world a better place. That's what we can do. And ultimately, at the heat death of the universe, if this planet has been swallowed up and there's no humans left, then it is true to say that we wouldn't have mattered in the sense of the universe. But the universe is not a conscious entity anyway, and so that doesn't for a moment give me pause. I think what they want to point is, look, I have something better than you. Whatever happens here on earth with my maker, if I'm a good person, for forever. And this is just a story that they all tell themselves because it makes them feel good, right? Pick up content over everything and everybody else there. So and again, just a reiteration, if you want to join the show, the link is in the chat. I'll post it here. Come in and join us, give us your thoughts. So I think that's one of the things, isn't it? This whole thing of you don't have an objective morality, you guys can do anything, and then they feel safe in their corner. But once you start to probe what they mean by objective, and whether it is in fact good, well, then that safe haven, has a light shine on it, and it's a bit like, a vampire with sunlight, seem to stand up very well.
Mm. And then if you really go and you probe a little bit deeper and you say, well, okay, if you look at your purpose and you look at your morality, if you look at your basis, you look at your foundation, what is it really that you are taking? What are you taking from whatever source you are using? And then you realize there's precious little. And then it gets to the point of the realization that the grounding that they have is actually their own personal interpretation of what they see, which at the end of the day is the same basis what I have. It's just that what they do is they take the text, whatever text they follow or like or whatever, and they try and bend it so that it fits exactly what they wanted to say. So there's no real difference. And for me, this is always laughable if I say, okay, I'm pro-life. Well, pro-life of what? Then people say, well, I'm pro-life of the baby. I said, well, I'm also pro-life of a baby because I don't think that you should torture babies just for fun. But then they're talking about something else. They're talking about you're not allowed to kill a zygote. And that is where I differ. Because this is where I say, well, sorry, there I will go more with the life of the mother than the life of a zygote. Because for me, anything, I mean, we need to appreciate that an embryo of something like, I don't know, 7-8 weeks, it's just 1 centimeter. Okay, it's is just a lump of different cells which are not conscious in any way. What Rob just said, the universe doesn't have a conscious, state or something. Neither does an embryo of 1 centimeter in size. Even though, yes, you can already start making out things, and there are limb buds and things like that. But there I tend to go rather with the life of the mother. So if there is a problem with the life of the mother, if there is a problem in maintaining a baby or something, then I would rather go for the life of the mother rather than for the life of a zygote. And this is where a lot of religious people differ, and they say, no, I am bound by my religion to uphold any kind of life. And they will do that even if it bloody well, not only interferes, but if it destroys the life of the mother. They will be adamant that the mother has to go and give birth to this baby. Which in my eyes is wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously with regard to abortion, but there's many other things. I take the same view as you, and I also add to that bodily autonomy. I think the autonomy of the mother takes precedence over something that has the potential to be a human, because of course they, in my view, beg the question, well, this is a human, right? Because two cells have come together. It has the potential to be the human. And if you're going to say it's human from conception, which a lot of theists do, well, then God is the greatest abortionist in history, right? If you think God has created everything, they will try and get out of this, presumably. Well, certain Christians would. I don't know how Muslims are going to try and get out of this by saying, no, that was Adam and Eve's fault, right? Adam and Eve brought the fall, and so some of this abortion is the curse put on man. I think is one of the greatest evils, mythical ideas ever perpetrated on man, this idea of original sin. And even Muslims recognize how terrible that is, and they don't have that. And I often say, in that sense, Islam is better than Christianity in terms of the, original sin. And
I want to say thank you, Ansar, for this very concise sort of summary of everything to promote caring about the suffering of sentient creatures. Wonderful. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it can be reflected in many other things. And a thing that we have, and I was talking about it, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, whenever the case is, there's flexibility on how do we improve this? Because I think a lot of theists are confused with it's anyway, in the sense of, well, you guys don't have like an objective standard. Well, we have a standard. Whether it's objective is arguable. But if we have the standard of well-being, then we are constantly have something to measure against. And what methodology do we use? Reason, science, and empathy, from my point of view. And I think in principle, that can answer many, if not all, of the questions, certainly in principle. And if we use that, then we have a standard which is subject to, like the scientific method, improvement, if you like, based on the well-being of humans. And if you're going to be a religious person, you have a static list. Now, we heard today, and you were speaking to him, weren't you, Stops, the fellow that said that the Quran was a living, like a changing entity or something like that. And I was sort of amused and surprised that he could say something like that, because obviously now that's not the mainstream view as far as I can tell. So they then have to say, well, there wasn't slavery, and we went through that today, and I didn't get to finish that, unfortunately, to go through the whole slavery thing. We had Black Isa, who's Shia Muslim, and obviously he's tried to work on responses. And interestingly enough, he was one that said yes, he would still want slavery to get today if. So I don't want to make it. I want to try and represent him accurately. If the other side had slavery as well, but I argued that owning a human being as property is always worse, all things being equal, than not. And he didn't agree. He thought that owning somebody as property was a morally good thing. And this is the problem that we have with sort of a static, I think, religious view. They've got to somehow try and argue for this, because they can't deny it. It's there in the book. It's clear. So how do you argue that it's better?
But how can you argue if this is your basis? A flying donkey? You can't. So if you think that the flying donkey is real, how can you argue anything can be taken seriously?
Again, yeah, I think that's the difficulty, right? When you have a conclusion and the facts don't meet the conclusion, you now have some gymnastics to perform in order for this to try and make sense. And you and I both say this, right? We critique Islam, the ideology, not all Muslims. And so there's a difference between the Muslims and the ideology, and we both agree, I think, that Muslims, most Muslims at least, are better than their book. And so for them, the challenge is, well, I've got these morals that I feel are much evolved as a species, but I've got this book telling me these old things that I would not do today. And how they reconcile that is just a fascination from a psychological point of view to witness and to listen to whenever we speak to them. But I think the big thing is, right, if the Quran shows that atheism is false, then we will atheism is false. Now, I don't see that. And the more we read the Quran, the more we look at it, the more this seems like a man-made book. And the lengths that some of the apologists will go to make it sound as if it's not man-made is just amazing. And that's kind of what I'm interested in, is what people say in order to try and hold on to this view, this conclusion that they've already met before they've done enough critical thinking and evaluation. What is it they will say in order to try and hold up that conclusion? The exact opposite of science, right? Which is interesting.
Teach, I make no sense. Okay, tell me how I don't make sense.
Yeah.
Just make the statement, I don't make sense. How does that help anyone? Doesn't help.
Good evening to anybody who's new that's watching us now. Again, if you want to join in, you're more than welcome. The link for it is in the video description. So thanks for joining us. There's the link again. If you want to join us, you can come on. You can tell us why you think atheism is false, and if you're a Muslim, why you knows that, or indeed if the Quran is true, because it is true that if the Quran is true, atheism is false. If atheism is true, the Quran is false. So I think we have got a dichotomy in that sense. Of course, outside of those two in theory could both be false, and Christianity or Hinduism could be true. But out of those two, if we're just looking at those two in isolation, one defeats the other. Obviously, we can't have a contradiction. Either one is, I think it's law of excluded middle. Either atheism is true, or in this case, the Quran, i.e. a form of Islam, is true. But that doesn't mean that there couldn't be another option out there. We're just focusing on those two because that's the nature of the stream tonight. So again, if you're listening and you want to join the link, we'd love to hear from you, especially if you're a Muslim and you feel like why you don't believe in atheism. Just tell us that you're Muslim, why you don't believe in atheism, and hopefully what you think in the Quran shows that atheism is false, aka that a God exists, but not just a God. It would need to be Allah. Because the other thing that I had with a Christian that I was speaking to a few days ago, he made a long argument with regard to the theorem and some other term. I can't remember what it was. I was familiar with it, and as far as we got to the point where methodological naturalism, aka science, cannot probe the metaphysical, or should we say the supernatural, and I'm in agreement with that. So in other words, if you're a deist, we can't falsify that, you can't show it, and I don't think there's good reasons for you to believe in deism, but that's not an easy claim to falsify, because if deism is true, that's a God that got this universe started but has no input into this universe at all. So with all the tools that we have, we can't ascertain whether that God exists or did anything. And so that God for me is uninteresting and unimportant, because a deist will essentially live their life the same as an atheist. They might appeal to this God, hey, we don't know what happened with the universe, but other than that, they'll live their life the same, because there's no books that tell them, there's no afterlife, as far as I know, in deism, certainly in normal deism. So again, you've got to get from a particular God to your God, because telling me that, we can't access the supernatural, that's fine. But if your God has interacted in this world in any way, i.e. written a book, spoken to human beings, performed some miracle, then in principle, we can bring the scientific method there. And I think, that's what we do all the time, especially with these arguments.
Well, the other thing is that if you look at the Quran, then it says, okay, this book was written by me, or actually it doesn't say that. You see, this is the problem. It says it was written by a God, the Lord and Master of the worlds. So, this is an expression that doesn't really make sense. What is the Lord of the worlds? I don't understand these things. So if I look at the way that anybody makes claims regarding these books, they're I don't know, they're inconsistent. They don't make sense. They're not grounded in anything factual. it's all wishful thinking and just some, la-di-da, vague and ambiguous stuff that doesn't really make sense without interpretation. So you first got to go and read 15,000 books before you can understand this one thin book of only, not even 6,500 sentences. So, this is quite weird to have all these claims. And then one thing I just saw in the chat, this thing with vegan. Now, to me, this is a bit funny because, I can understand vegetarian. I can understand that you don't want to see the suffering of animals. But then if you can't tolerate the suffering of animals, then you shouldn't tolerate the suffering of plants. And if you pluck fruit from a tree, it screams in agony because it hurts. The same way as if you cut grass, the same way. So how are you going to differentiate? You cannot live without killing something. Your cells die all the time. So just by being alive, you are killing things. So, this veganism, I think this is a label that people put on their conscience and say, you see, I'm such a good person. But at the end of the day, if you have a slab of meat which was artificially grown, would that make vegetarianism, would it make that fall away? Or if you grow this artificially, would you still be a vegan, or would you go and eat the meat? Or would you say, well, somewhere along the line there must have been a donor cell? It gets ridiculous after a while if you think about it. So, the same thing that applies to religions, the same thing that applies to the claims made around gods, it gets a bit silly if you really, drill down and you take it to extremes. And if you really go to the core of the matter, in my eyes, this is very, very similar.
I guess there we'd have actually quite an interesting, I'm not sure this is the time because we've got, the particular title, but you and I could discuss this. I think veganism has got some moral strong points to it if you take the view that veganism is about avoiding the unnecessary suffering of animals. So if you
vegetarian.
Can well, veganism includes and it depends, because some vegans go quite far, but it includes not housing cows in where they cannot move just to have their milk taken, for example. So it would include dairy products, and extreme vegans would include honey and stuff like that. In other words, if you are imposing your will on other creatures without their permission, then the extreme vegan would go, that's unethical, because you don't require any of that either to survive or to thrive. And there could be a case in those rare instances where those people that need some version of something from an animal, for example, there could be that distinction, I guess. But I think there's a moral case to be made there. And I think when we talk about suffering, I think as far as we can tell, suffering is involved with a brain and a nervous system. The idea that the plants can suffer, I don't think is an accurate one, because they don't have a nervous system. They don't have any sort of brain. So what is happening is they have a biological response, let's say cutting the grass or chopping that off. But I think we're pretty safe in saying, we can't say for certain, but I think we're pretty safe in saying they can't suffer. There's no pain or suffering involved. There's simply a chemical reaction that's going on there. And if they do suffer in some way, then it's something that we have no knowledge of. It's beyond our capability. So I think a vegan is quite safe in saying, well, no, plants don't suffer as sentient animals do. Then the question becomes, well, where does the suffering kick in? Does an ant suffer? Does a fly suffer? And that's an interesting question. Where is the line? I would suggest the line includes a nervous system and a brain, as far as we can tell. But I can't say for certain that a fly doesn't suffer in some way if you were to pull its wings off or whatever the case is. That I don't know. But I think I feel like I'm on safe ground saying that no sort of plant, no sort of non-animal suffers in any way that we would understand suffering.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I'm saying if you take it to extremes, okay, this was my premise.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, otherwise I agree.
But I think again,
I just happened to see this on the chat, and this is why I thought let me quickly address this.
I think with our system as well stops, we have the ability to incorporate that. If you ask a religious person, and William Lane Craig was asked this, interestingly enough, and probably one of the best debates I've ever seen. If you look up William Lane Craig, and there was a philosopher, his name escapes me now. He's wearing glasses, he's got like sneakers on and stuff like that. Very telling debate, because it was kind of on morals. and they had a back and forth discussion, which is very rare for William Lane Craig, right? He does his opening statement, he does a rebuttal, maybe a second rebuttal and a closing statement. No point does he have a conversation like you and I are doing. And with this particular philosopher who was an atheist, he had this back and forth, and it was
sitting on a
revealing.
stage. I remember this.
Yes, exactly. If you can think of the other guy's name, I just can't think of it now. It might. Hey, yeah, I remember. But he asked Craig, because Craig said, well, as a theist, God has put us in charge to take care of all the animals. And it was a brilliant question. He asked, do you eat meat? And Craig said, yes. And he said, well, obviously that doesn't apply to certain animals that you have for food. With the implication that when it suits you, you can step away from that, and those animals you're not taking care of, right? Those animals don't want to die. You're eating them because you like the taste of it. And in fact, you don't like the taste in and of itself, right? If you have raw meat, that doesn't. Right, so you've got to prepare it. You've got to do all these things and then make it say it's good. If you just slap a piece of meat on, that's pretty bland. And if you eat it raw, that's even worse, right? I mean, you could eat it to survive, but nobody's going to go, hey, I love a piece of cow. And if you have the wrong parts, you won't be able to either chew it or digest it, right? You just don't have the right thing to do that raw. So I think
do you know steak tartare?
Yes, yeah. It's like a specially prepared raw version, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've got exceptions to that. But I think if you went to have some buffalo hide, good luck even, getting your teeth to do anything to that, right? They'd be immune to human consumption if you were just doing it naturally, right? You need lion's teeth and jaws of the power of a lion or a crocodile or whatever. A digression, but I think going back to it, it does allow us to incorporate and say, hey, we recognize that certain animals suffer. We don't want that to happen. And if we don't need to, then should we minimize the suffering, especially factory farming and that sort of stuff, with animals are in tremendous pain and suffering. If you look at some of these undercover things, it's terrible, but people, sort of turn a blind eye to it and hope that, as long as I see it nicely packaged in a supermarket, well, then I can eat it and it's all fine. If you were to see the process by which it gets to that pointer on your table, that might give you pause for thought, especially where I am out in the country, because I see the cows and the sheep and I go up to them and there's a sentient being there like my dog or anything else. They want to live, they want to thrive, they want to avoid pain, they want to live as long and pain-free a life as possible. We haven't asked their permission and we're just slaughtering. Well, luckily here they're free grazing, but elsewhere they're not.
If we discuss this, we are free to discuss this. We are able to discuss a situation, a concept, the consequences, and then we are free to take a decision. If I go back to Islam now, we cannot do that. Everything is prefabricated. Every single aspect of our lives is already defined. So if I go to the Quran now, we don't have the freedom to do that. We don't have the ability to take a concept in the Quran, discuss it, and then take our own decision. All our decisions have been made for us. This goes to extremes, like women are told what to wear, and we are told how to behave with everything, especially when it comes to sex, especially when it comes to anything to do with human interaction. We're allowed this, we're not allowed that, we're allowed this, not this. So everything is preconceived and you're not allowed to go and discuss this and take your own decision. And this is the biggest problem in Islam. And that is why it doesn't fit into the 21st century. It's not because, people just want to sin, people just want to, no. It is just the normal human interaction that is missing. The normal human interaction that is preconditioned in Islam, which does not fit into today's society. And I don't care if somebody tells me today's society is immoral, corrupt, or whatever. That is simply not true. The basics are missing. And this is the biggest problem that we have in Islam, at least according to me.
And I think the other thing is, if you're a Muslim and you're going to say no, but we can interpret the Quran in different ways. Big up to Raj there. Again, yes, Raj, you're welcome to join, actually, because although it's Islam...
No, it's not a big up. I'm not doing my atheism.
No, big up as in he's welcome to join. And Funky, the Don, ultra today. This man brought some love. He broke a few hearts in his life. Presumably these are female hearts because he's just such a Don. And he's a king of Street Fighter. So for me, he's got Don status, at least for today. So again, if you want to join us on the stream at all and share your views, by all means, there we go. But I think stops. The other thing is with them, it's either rigid with some sort of interpretation. Well, it doesn't really mean slavery. What it means is this, or it is slavery, and then they're going to try and argue for it, like Shia Isa, for example. But a lot of Muslims want to shy away from slavery, and I think rightly so, or beating your wife or whatever.
Exactly.
And so they are going to either they're going to have to reinterpret it, but that in a right. So the fact that they're going to reinterpret the Quran tells me that there isn't a clear enough message in there. But I want to bring in Raj here because Raj was talking about it.
Big up to Stops and big up to Rob. I have to say, you two on Sir Faz is my guilty pleasure. I'm not gonna lie. It's something about you two just going. It's like I can't explain it. It's like, I don't know. I've never seen such stupidity like on that channel. Like when you lot talk, I can't believe you lot even keep a straight face when you're talking to them. Like I can imagine you lot laughing as you're chatting. Or are you actually disgusted? I don't know which one. It might be disgust.
Well, I try to avoid any of the emotional side, and I'm listening to what is somebody saying, and are they making sense to the best of my ability. I'm only human, and I get frustrated. Stuff, and if you were on and off a bit today on Valley Stream, Raj, but Stops was on for a good while, and he had a great conversation with a couple of, firstly with a Muslim and then with a Christian, and he sort of kept his calm, and he just sort of revealed, and I'm not saying that they are typical of all Christians, but he just revealed some of the problems. Right now, you can avoid that because you're not an Abrahamic, believer, but since you are a believer, this is focused on the Quran, but obviously. And you sort of said it tongue in cheek, and we had that conversation where you now I don't know whether you still view that, and we had that, and Stops us here, and maybe we can have a bit of a discussion. But you said at one point, atheism is worse than any religion, and I don't know whether
I think it's like one of those situations. Like, oh shit, I made a bit of a mistake here. When you jumped on, I was like, all right. I think what I was trying to get up, and the thing is, when you're on a panel with I was trying to make the kind of argument that I feel like. The UK, the reason I'm talking about UK specifically, I think atheism, although I agree some of the best people I've met are atheists, I'm not gonna lie. In fact, people like some people like Ultra, and I'm like, restore my faith in humanity sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, because some of the people that are for religious faiths are such hypocrites and narcissists and nasty individuals, including myself to a certain degree. And they're trying to be moral according to God's law, but some of the most moral people I've met are actually, just going by the gut instinct of what is right and wrong. God doesn't need to tell you to do that. So yeah, I kind of was talking more about my concern about the UK, in the sense that I'm concerned about the vacuum that's going to be left by the kind of disappearance of Christianity as a kind of a cultural Christian background, and what will be filled with that could be Islam or different faiths that. I'm not as forward thinking, so I think.
Well, let me ask you this, Raj: if it were the case that it was myself or Stops, or indeed some of our atheist friends in the viewing panel there, and we were the majority, would you say that is better than Christianity? Would you say it's worse? How would you feel about me, Stops, and other atheists that you've met with a system? By the way, obviously, if we just said, "Hey, we go with our gut." Us don't, and I could put an argument as to what my moral system is. I step back now from arguing that it's objective, because I think that word holds us back, but we can compare moral systems. And I guess I could say, if it were the case that, we filled that vacuum and became the majority in the country with a moral system, which I can put forward for your Stops might have a slightly different one, but I think we all go with the well-being of conscious creatures, and then we have certain criteria around that. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, although I'm religious, I would never want a country run on theocracy. I think theocracies are problematic, and I do believe that in order to have a productive society, it should be run on secularism, and that means anybody who is an atheist. And I think if it was you guys and certain individuals. Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue, but there are a lot of dumb people out there, and unfortunately, I might be one of them. But you're looking at people that will make bad decisions. I think with you guys, I think you kind of, because I'll give you a props. You're intelligent people, and you're probably looking at the world from your kind of viewpoint of logic. But there are a lot of people that are very illogical, and so they can be swayed very easily. People can do terrible things in the name of religion, or even other kind of like systems and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem if it was like people like if it was you, Ultra, like just say the G Block, like those guys. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't take over the UK. Like if it was them, yeah, I wouldn't have an issue. But I don't trust. I think there is a place still for religion, though, in my opinion. I know it sounds a bit contradictory.
When you say there's a place for religion, do you mean in the moral sphere? I wouldn't want to deprive somebody of believing what they want. Ideally, for me, I'd want to have people believe what is likely to be true, and if they don't have good reasons, I'd want them to reevaluate it. But I wouldn't prevent them from believing whatever they want. Where my prevention would come in is certain actions that are in conflict.
Yeah,
let's say
remember my religious. I was just having a conversation on the other channel about how the Dharmic faiths are kind of very actually opposed to the version of God that the Abrahamic faiths have, because Abrahamic faith's version of God is a vengeful, vindictive God, in my opinion, and whereas the Dharmic faiths is a God that is strict but not vindictive. Yeah, not in the sense that he'll give you another chance through reincarnation and stuff like that. So for me, like I don't believe that, the when I'm talking about, religion, I think it has a place in a kind of community cohesion kind of way, having an umbrella of a faith. Do I think it's can make you a good person? No, some religions can make you worse. I think people that are atheists, I don't judge them. I don't meet an atheist and think, okay, they don't, because a lot of religious people, especially Muslims, go, if you're an atheist, you can't be moral. What is your moral groundwork? And I don't believe that kind of bullshit. I think an atheist, I do believe you can go heaven as an atheist, in my opinion. Or
So
spend
where do
time
we
with
get
God.
our morality from then?
I think most people have an innate kind of like, within their kind of like gut feeling what's right and wrong, and some people choose to go against it, and there are people that are born that literally don't know, like a psychopath, and other people are easily swayed by the masses. So as much as you might hate me, a lot of people hate me, it's very hard to sway me. If I believe something, I'm going to stick to what I believe, but most people can be swayed. But if 5 people say something, they'll move over to that way of thinking, and that's what becomes kind of problematic. So I would say that with religion, I think what I'm talking about more is a kind of like a cultural cohesion kind of place, not for it to interfere with laws or for it to interfere with the country as a whole in terms of its government and stuff. I think that should stay, and religion, faith should stay separate. So yeah.
Well, this is the big problem with Islam.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. That's the biggest problem. And luckily, throughout Sikhism, we don't have that issue per se. We don't really have a political wing per se. We have rules and regulations, but they're not to the extent that you have with Islam, where your everyday life is run. And yeah, so it's probably. Can I say that I can't stay on long? But the reason I jumped on you is what I've realised. I can't go and surf Fazis, but every time I'm on there, no matter what the topic is, you could be talking about. Let's just say, there's something going on in the Middle East, and somebody called Ghost Speakers Corner will go, oh, Raj was over there. Raj supports Tommy Robinson. Oh, you can be talking about anything, and my name will pop into it as a way to kind of counter any argument that you're putting across. And the reason I just want to explain a couple of things here. Some of these guys on there, I don't know what it is. They're either in love with me, or they have a weird kind of fetish for Sikhs, yeah, or this particular Sikh. And I just want to clarify one or two things that they keep on going on about.
Okay, Raj, before you do, I think, to be fair, though, that's a thing to do on your channel. I mean, to bring them in and have like that sort of drama. I know that you guys have got a back and forth, but then to be fair, I'd have to have Safaz on here as well.
No,
So-
I just want to make one point clear, because the thing is that one of the things that they keep on saying is that with the prayers within the park, I heard that because I don't have a problem with prayers within the park.
You do
but
or you don't?
I don't personally, as long as it's done to the side. Yeah.
But
What I
you do
did-
realize that contravenes the guidelines.
Yeah, I know, I understand. But what I did have a problem was they went bang in the middle of the prayer in Speaker's Corner to make a political statement. I thought it was very provocative. I mean, they knew what they were doing, and the reason they come in the middle was to kind of say, okay, you can't stop us. And what it was, they were talking about another thing I had a discussion with, which is that they were trying to equate them lot kind of going against the law of the park to me saying that if I won't leave the UK if I was being deported. And I just want to clarify that particular situation was that I said if these fascists come into power, like Ralph and them lot, they said I have to leave, yeah. And I said I would go against the law if you was dragging me out my house to deport me. So obviously there's no real comparison. I just wanted to kind of clarify. And there's a lot of other things. Just take it with a pinch of salt. I do want to go on there if you can control it.
No, Raj, please don't. No. Don't bring this here, please.
No. Here I'm saying going over there because the thing is, the problem is that I've wanted to go on there to clarify my position on multiple occasions.
All right, but yeah, we're not in a position to go there and plead
No,
for you
no.
and say, please say Raj. No.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that next time they start discussing me, if you can try and arrange it so I can jump on. Yeah. So last time you said get Raj on it.
Can't.
Every time you've gone on, there's been like a shouting match and stuff between you guys, and I think it's not that productive. I think the best way is to invite one or two of them to your channel, but then, or we could what I could do is say, okay, so Faz and Raj, I will moderate between the two of you. I will be as fair as I can. You can do it on the Speaker's Corner channel. Have all your viewers come and look here, and I'll moderate. I'll literally mute the two of you because if you're shouting over each other, that's no good. And also, if you want to, I will challenge you externally because I don't want to have a dog in the hunt. That way, doing it on each other's channels is probably you're never going to get anywhere because you've just got those audiences that either.
I mean, if you're willing to do that, I don't mind because there's a lot of because I find that every time I see you on there, like around 50% of the time, my name's been dragged through the mud, and I try to get on there, but if I do go on there, it turns into a right shit show. So
that's a problem. And I mean, I always say to them, if you've got Raj on, get him on to have that conversation or whatever. I'm not going to. If what you guys are saying, then I will disagree with Raj on whatever it is. But that's a big if, right? So because they're obviously putting things to me, but I'm saying, well, I don't see the evidence of X, Y, and Z. So do that with Raj. I don't mind doing that here. So if you message him and so on,
I don't really communicate with him. So if you want to next time you're on there, say I'm willing to host it, and then we can kind of thrash out a few things.
I do. I mean, I'm sort of hanging out with Valley and those guys because that's
we could do it on Valley's as well.
Yeah, that's another neutral place, right? So we could do it there. So
all right. So sorry for dragging your thing into the gutter. I apologize.
No problem. We'll bring it out again and dust.
The other thing was I spoke to Raspik yesterday and I was trying to say we was having a discussion about cultures, and I was trying to say that some cultures are objectively bad, like not cultural practices. Yeah. So. But they were making a claim that if you criticize particular cultural practice, you're kind of being prejudiced or racist. But I was like, in India, they used to have a cultural practice of sati, where the woman would put herself in a funeral pyre when her husband died. Now, that's objectively bad, isn't it? I mean, killing yourself because your husband died, and I mean,
I mean, some of those things I think if it depends on the standard. So there's a bit more to it than that. We have to establish a foundation, and then we have to argue why it's good or why it's bad. But I agree. I had a conversation with again, this is going off topic, but just for like 2 seconds, I had a conversation with Raspik, and he did everything he could to try and paint me as a racist. So I don't have a lot of respect for Raspik. In fact, Jedi came on and we had a discussion, and I've got some more respect for Jedi. Actually, he took a bit of a strong view initially that he thought potentially I was racist. Then he reevaluated, listened to what I had said, and he took it back. And I think that's the sign of somebody who's paying attention. They made a mistake about thinking. I don't have a lot of respect for that. And again, that's just off topic. But if we want to have that discussion, we can do that. Again, I don't mind moderating that. But I do think as long as you have a standard, once you have a standard you've agreed upon, I think the difficulty is agreeing on the standard. Once you agree on that, then you can say, based on this standard, something is objectively bad. So once you agree that the well-being of conscious creatures is our standard, then a woman committing suicide in a torturous way to be with a husband that she doesn't even know is actually the case. It's like it's a crapshoot. Actively bad if you care about the well-being, because her well-being hasn't been demonstrated. If she could demonstrate that the afterlife was in fact the thing, but if that were the standard, right? If it were the case that in that culture you could show that the afterlife was better, objectively better for well-being, because that would be well-being in another world, then it would be the case that everybody should commit suicide, right? You'd want to. So there's bad implications with that as well. So again, we have to establish, is it well-being? And if it is it in this life, the one that we know we have, or is it potentially in another life that we don't know we have, that might be better than that, because most people think they're going to be judged anyway. So it's a real crapshoot as to A, whether it exists, and B, if it does exist, are you actually going to be in the good part, or is it actually going to be objectively worse for your well-being as a spirit, or whatever the term might be, in the afterlife, which might be an eternal hell. So for me, and I'm sure for Stops, if we look at this, if we're going to use probabilities, I'm not, it doesn't even enter my awareness. This probability of something, hell existing is just as close to non-existent as is the case. Because even if I believe that there was an afterlife, I still have to be judged in many of these religions, and the chance of me being, on the good side is rare if these books are true.
Yeah, I might come back on it. We might talk. I might actually challenge you on eating meat actually one day.
Yeah, you can definitely.
Yeah, I was a vegan for a bit, but I was one of those type of people that when I do, you might know, when I do something, I take it to the nth degree. So I'm a vegetarian still. So yeah, thanks for letting me on. Next time you're on there and they kind of talk about me, don't bring it up unless they talk about me and say, yeah, maybe you might want to discuss it with Raj and I can moderate.
I don't mind doing a thing on this channel. Yeah.
Anyway, man, big up to Stops as well. How you doing, man?
Yeah, well,
you're not going to say big up.
Cool, mate. Good to hear from you.
Tell me to say big up to me.
I understand that. It just sounds so funny.
All right. I know it annoys you, man. Anyway, man, take care, man. All right.
You too. Take it easy.
Yes, buddy. This is the sort of comment, unfortunately, that you really do wonder if anybody's paying attention. And if they are, do they comprehend what I've said?
No.
I asked this particular person what it is that he thought I was, what was my point and how was I waffling? I'd probably get some gibberish or non-response, and it's a shame.
The same goes that I don't make sense without saying why, where, how. So it doesn't. I just ignore it. Listen, I've got one question because I heard this now. What is the story with Tommy Robinson? Why is it that a Muslim will come to me and call me a cocksucker and a filthy, dirty atheist and no, what is a filthy, dirty pig? Sorry, and a filthy atheist. And then say, well, I am like Tommy Robinson. What is it with Tommy Robinson that rubs people the wrong way?
I think they think he's a racist, so anything he says can be dismissed. And I think that's the is
that an excuse?
MO, right, of certain people, be it somebody like Respect or people on the far left. If you can smear somebody as a racist, then anything they say can be dismissed out of hand. Like I had a conversation with Ralph, right? Many people think he's a racist, right? He says he's not doing it on race. He's doing it on whatever it is, a phenotype or whatever that might be synonymous with race. I haven't listened to his whole philosophy on, this ethno-nationalism type stuff. But I can have the conversation. The fact that he's a racist doesn't mean that I can't listen to what he's got to say and critique it. But other people either are intellectually lazy or dishonest, and so they want to paint somebody as a racist and then not have a conversation with anybody. And I think that's part of the thing with Robinson. I think people want to smear him. Some of them might be concerned that he's got too much I wouldn't say authority, but he's got too much reach with people. And so if you can smear him, if you can throw shit and it sticks, then people want to separate themselves from him. And I think that's part of it. Now, I'm not saying he isn't a racist or that he is. There was a question put to me about, is a particular statement racist? And I said, no, my understanding of race is prejudice based on skin color. So that's to be, but I think that's the whole thing, right? So it's like being a Nazi. So if you're associated or if you're like Tommy Robinson, then you're automatically just a bad person and nobody has to listen to you, which is of course just intellectually dishonest.
So it's not that there's anything particular. It's just that they don't like what he says. They don't like that he was against Muslim immigration, and that's it. Now they're looking for any reason to, I don't know, defile him or something. Is that it? That's simple.
Well, there's a thing to say that he's far right and he's right. That's the case. Then anything he says can be dismissed immediately. Okay. So once you're in that label, it's like you're a Nazi. If you get labeled and you were an actual Nazi, doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth. You should not have a platform. You should not be allowed to speak. In fact, some people go to the thing of that have violence or that prevent you from speaking anywhere. Right. So and ultimately, I think there's that sort of thing going on.
But the thing is that Tommy Robinson, to me, I acknowledge that he, there's a certain charisma. I acknowledge that he can move people. I acknowledge that he is able to, to rally people behind him. But that's about it. So I enjoyed very much what he did with the free speech. Whatever the motive behind it or agenda might have been, the fact, the way that he did it, the way he pulled it off, I think that was great. And it showed a lot of integrity, that he did not use it for his own purpose, but he just read the speech and that is it. So this was a sheer free speech event. And this is, not attached to anything else that he says and or thinks or acts, or it doesn't really matter. I just find that he's been, given, I don't know, the raw end of the deal. I don't think everything that happens to him is fair, but I'm not somebody who's a Tommy Robinson supporter or anything like that, because I don't know enough about him.
I'm the same. So, like I said, somebody asked me, "What do you support him?" I said, "No, I don't support the man. I will agree with some positions, and I will disagree with others." Him saying, apparently, I haven't heard that one, but him saying something about Pakis, I absolutely disagree with. Him saying the claim that, "Hey, Mo Farah, the reason you feel like discriminated against here is Somalis are backward barbarians." That was a claim that was racist. I said, to me, saying that somebody's a backward barbarian isn't necessarily racist unless you can show that it relates to their skin colors. Because I think there are some backward barbarians in the north of England. I went up there and I was astonished. It was like I went backwards in time. And again, this is not everybody, So some people in the north of England, and I witnessed some of them, and I wouldn't smear everybody like that, right? And there might be some people in the south of England, but I was particularly struck by some of the people in North England, up in sort of Hull area and that area. I would consider backward barbarians by my standards, and maybe my standards are high or low, whatever the case is, right? So if you can use it somewhere else, I think something like the word nigger, for example, that is racist. You can't use that word for any other group of people. Chink, you can't use for any other group of people. There would be because that refers, I think, directly to the skin color, and it refers to a group of people that you cannot use it for anything else. So, but that's what it is. And I think we've got to be more nuanced, right?
Okay, but why? Why, for example, because, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, everybody knows it. Children used it. I'd used it, and it was totally harmless. So what made it so bad?
Well, I think there's a big sort of victim culture going on. I did talk about this with Jedi, because at least you can have a conversation with Jedi, right? Even if we disagree, when he's in a calm, thoughtful mood, he is somebody that you can have that conversation with. And I put it to him that holding the word racism, or holding the word nigger, chink, foo, because he said he had a channel where he used all of these words on purpose. And I put it to him, and this has been my argument all along. As long as you are affected by these words in a negative way, somebody has the power to use them over you. In other words, somebody owns part of your psyche. As soon as you can detach yourself from that, you're in control. And he understood this, but there's still this thing of like, look back at history, right? We've got to look at history. And I said, I'm not denying history, but how long are you going to hold that weight with you? What it meant about history. Yes, it did.
But anybody can call me a white supremacist. I don't give a fucking care. So what? I'm not. So if somebody calls me that, I don't care. It's not.
I suppose the danger is if enough people saying it and they don't have good reasons or evidence, or they've heard it, then they're likely to dismiss you, and that's unhelpful. And it's especially unhelpful for those intellectually dishonest people that want to do that. And I think actually Jedi made a good point in the sense that use this word sparingly. Use it when it actually applies to someone that is demonstrably racist. And then we have to decide, what do we mean by racist? When the person qualifies, then call them that. But use it sparingly. It's the same as the word far left has branded anybody that isn't far left, like partially lunatic, as a Nazi. And now the word has no meaning. When I hear the word Nazi, I'm okay, that's some Looney Tune just claiming that somebody doesn't agree with them, right? It has no meaning left.
So what about the word nigger? What makes it so negative?
I think because a certain number of that grossly, quote unquote, offensive. And my point is, well, how long are you going to choose to feel that way? Some people in America, take somebody like Thomas Sowell, for example, doesn't think that's the case. And they've gone, okay, that is somebody that is ignorant, and I'm not going to choose to feel offended by that. I suppose the response, one of the responses on the other side could be, well, hey, if enough people said this and there's a negative connotation, that could lead to some further discrimination. That might be their response. So,
all right, okay, that's.
I think we've gone off on a bit of a tangent there. So
yeah, but to bring it back now, is this now part of Islam? And this is, I think, a very interesting answer, because the answer that I would give is yes and no. is there racism? Is this a prejudice? And I would clearly say yes or no. And no, both. Because on the one hand, you have slaves, which are predominantly blacks. And on the other hand, you have the Quran itself, who mentions different nations, but does not mention different skin colors. Now you have the different hadiths which refer to the raisin head, which was different things. And the prime example that we're constantly being fed, that Bilal was a black guy and he was a slave and a black guy and he was one of the most revered leaders and things like that. So what? It doesn't really matter.
You mean Bilal, I think it is, isn't it?
Yes.
That character. That was free.
What did I say?
Yeah, no, you said the black guy. You didn't mention a name. I thought it was Bilal, if I remember correctly. And again, Muslims will point to that and go, hey, look, and I had this conversation earlier today. Hey, look, there are places in the Quran where Muhammad, aka Allah, said to free slaves. And I think you and I will agree, they're under certain circumstances that they allowed the freedom of slaves. And my point is, if Muhammad had one of his first revelations that said abolish slavery, never own another human being as property ever again. If you're in a time of war, you can take captives if necessary. There may be circumstances where you can, invoke the death penalty for whatever reason. I couldn't say that that's impossible. I'm kind of against the death penalty, but in the 7th century, there might be an argument where that could be used even on a captive if they were trying to kill the guards or whatever the case may be. But my point is that if he had abolished the ownership of one human being by another, that would be a moral point. And then I would acknowledge, and I suppose you would too, hey, here's something that Muhammad did in the 7th century that was objective. Well, we could say is a good thing, objectively good, if you, depending on your standard, like well-being, that good. He abolished the idea of owning one human being by another, and that's not there. And obviously I had a discussion today where Shia Isa, for example, tried to make the point that no, owning one human being with another is not morally repugnant. And I said, all things being equal, owning one human being as another, that's the only point I want to make. Owning one human being over another is worse than having treated the two of them exactly the same. If you had two of them, one was owned as a slave that could be traded, but you didn't do the trading part. You owned them as property. The other was a captive that you did not own and you saw as a human being. I would say the owned person is worse. That view of owning somebody is worse.
Another thing, a point I'd like to raise or bring to everybody's attention, because I simply happen to have looked into this. If you go and you look at the hadiths which go and describe Muhammad's life, then you will read that, for example, his wives had servants and slaves. Now, the difference between them is that a slave can be jointly owned. In other words, the person does not necessarily have to have the money all himself. He can go and have a sixth of a slave who is then going to be there like for one day and help him do whatever. And then the next guy will have it. So if one guy now manumits a slave and says, well, I can't afford it anymore, something, then the others have to take over. And if they all manumit him and he goes free, he now needs to stay within that in that group. Because he is black, and this is the built-in racism that you do have in Islam. If you have a black slave who is set free, who then tries to go back home, is going to be recaptured because they think it's a slave that has run away. So this is a huge problem in Islam, where the black guy, and this is again where you see the women, the free women, the Muslim women are supposed to, when they travel, they're supposed to throw a cloak over themselves so that they are recognized and are not harassed and are not taken as slaves, because then nobody will think that they are runaway slaves. This is exactly the reason why we see this.
Sorry, I had to step away for a moment there. Nature calls, so I missed a little bit of that. I got your part where there was a difference between them. So, again, if you've got,
I agree wholeheartedly with you that even if a woman is free and she should cover herself, there should not be the situation. The worst Quran sentence, I think, is where it says that if you kill a slave of somebody else, then you need to kill one of your slaves. So this is inhumane in my eyes, because what happens is if you run over somebody's slave with a tractor or with a horse or something, and you by mistake kill that slave, you now need to kill one of your slaves who has done absolutely nothing wrong, just to go and make up for this.
That's an interesting one. I do remember us talking about that. I don't remember the text for that. Have that, because obviously there might be Muslims who know about that, but won't speak about it, or that might be new information to people about that. So if you've got a reference at some point, we could always share a screen on that. But I do remember us talking about that, and I agree. If you did something by mistake, I'm guessing, and I don't remember if we've had Muslims respond to that, but that isn't compulsory. That's one thing you could do. Or is it clear from your recollection that it's compulsory? You don't have an option of not doing that,
No,
i.e. killing your own
you have
slave.
to.
Oh, you're compelled to. It's not like you can give them some money and say, hey, I mistakenly killed your slave. Here's what your slave is worth. You are compelled to kill a slave of yours, presumably of your own choice, or maybe of the other slave owner's choice. How exactly does that work? Do you remember?
Okay, it's in 2:178. Can
Okay,
I share this quickly?
I can do that, I guess.
Application window, here you go. So I've only got okay, we can do different ones. Shall we take, which one should we take?
Okay, let me make that full screen.
Let me take the corpus in here to see the real word for word. Where is Yusuf Ali and Yusuf Ali? And then I will remove the Sahih International, and I will just keep these two. So the corpus says, oh, you believe, prescribe for you the legal retribution. So if you kill somebody, the murdered, okay, the freeman for the freeman, the slave for the slave, and the female for the female. And that's it.
But whoever is pardoned for it from his brother anything, it obviously doesn't make sense, then follows up with suitable and payment to him with kindness. That is a concession from your Lord and mercy. Then whatever transgresses after that, then for him is a punishment painful. Okay, let's just do the whole Yusuf Ali. O ye who believe, the law of equality is prescribed to you in cases of murder. The free for the free, the slave for the slave, the woman for the woman. But if any remission is made by the brother of the slain, then grant any reasonable demand and compensate with him with handsome gratitude. So is that not saying then that you could do gratitude as opposed to kill a slave?
Okay, now I understand what you're saying. Yes, then it is. Then I take that back. Okay, I got it wrong. I understood this the wrong way. Yes, you can, if any remission is made, but you don't have to. You see, if any
so I
remission
suppose
is made,
you could. Yeah, you could then, in that case, if you say, hey, I don't want to give any money to this guy, I'll kill one of my worst slaves because he's been a lazy bastard, then you could follow that. So you have seemingly both options.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is incredibly cruel.
Yeah, the fact that it allows you to do that.
Yeah.
But that again goes to the thing of seeing these people as property and not as fellow human beings. And Isa was like incredulous with me, going, hey, like it's almost like he was saying to me, you're crazy, right? We were talking about the desert, then he jumped forward to today, and he basically said to me, hey, if somebody came here and bombed some people, what do you he tried to make the analogy of a dog. And I said, well, it's still a human being, right? You could make the argument for capital punishment. I'm predominantly against that, but there could be exceptions to that. But I'm still going to treat him as a human being, and I'm not going to own him as property purely because he blew somebody up. I'm going to have the law, do that. If I'm being blind, obviously, if it's my own family, I'd feel the emotion. I couldn't get away from that. I'm human. I'd probably want to, take his life. Ultra Funky, thank you. The super chat. That's awesome. Thank you so much, my friend. Atheism is so beautiful. Join us or be wrong. Thank you so much, Ultra Funky. Do join us. Here's the link again. Thanks for that super chat, brother. Definitely a don today, no doubt about it. You've got a don for about 3.5 more hours, Ultra Funky. Then you've got to do something amazing tomorrow to have that don status back again, my man. So I said, look, he's still a human being, right? I'm guessing, rather than she, although there've been, female suicide bombers. But he was incredulous. Like, it's like, no, you should treat them as less than human. because they committed such a heinous act. And I agree that they committed a heinous act. That doesn't make them less. They're still a human being with bad ideas in their head. And so he tried to equate it with a dog. Well, hey, a dog wouldn't do that. Well, obviously a dog's not capable of doing that on their own anyway. I just thought that was kind of a bad thing. But it was like he was incredulous that I would treat somebody as a human being no matter what they had done. And again, if justice is blind, that's supposedly what you do, right?
Exactly.
It's not easy. It's easier to do if you're sitting back looking at it and go, okay, we're going to apply a principle uniformly. Otherwise, we're going to have to you have very good reasons to apply it selectively, much worse. So if we said, okay, if you blow somebody up, we're not only just going to have you, committed, you're now going to be a slave. You could be traded as property. We'll trade you with somewhere else that's doing slavery. Well, obviously now we start to condone slavery. So there's a slippery slope. You go down there as well. So I don't see the value of owning somebody, and I see a detriment to owning another human being as property, because you can do all the same things that you could with a slave, the label of owning another human being.
But what do you say to the attempts of rescuing this? Why would a Muslim who says, well, I believe in the Quran 100% and everything is true and everything is great and dandy, why would this Muslim now go and say, well, hang on, slavery in the Quran and in Islam is not the same as slavery everywhere else? That the transatlantic slave trade was a lot worse than the slavery in Islam, because look, we're in a battle, we're in a war, and then the women who used to, take care of the wounded and prepare the meals and things like that, they are left over. They have nobody to care for them, so we are taking them as slaves and giving them an existence rather than killing them. Isn't that better? Why would a Muslim do that, do you think?
I think because they have to protect this idea of slavery. And I always ask the question, well, did you ask them permission? It's almost as if they think that women are utterly helpless. And especially in those days, women could take care of themselves as well. It wasn't like they sat there and like, oh my God, I don't have a man. I'm just going to melt in the sun of the hot Arabian desert. They're obviously able to adapt to the situation. Women, some studies, apparently, I haven't referenced them myself, women can withstand pain and suffering greater than men. And I don't know whether that's a general or whether that's some women, but women they're not strong or anything, but they can withstand certain things, at least as well as men, if not. But it's the idea of having this thing of, well, what are they going to do with them? Well, leave them there. Give them the option of leave them there. You could give them the option of coming along and being your servant. At least that's better than being a slave, right? We've slaughtered all your men. They're not going to jump at the idea, but if you'd burnt everything down and they were sitting there and there was like 100 miles and they're going to die, they could go, okay, I'll be your servant. I'll serve you when we get to the next village. I'd like to be let go, please. Again, all of these things we could do, and we could say, okay, Muhammad, that was quite a moral thing. Okay, you had this battle that presumably you didn't start. Let's have that proviso. If you started the battle, moral, you've got a black mark against your name. But let's say you were defending and you had to wipe these people out so that they couldn't, that's often the Muslim claim. Then let them go, offer them the opportunity to be a servant where they can be released after a certain amount of time if they've eaten certain food or whatever, where you come to some sort of agreement and they've worked for whatever they've done, and you could release them. That would be a moral thing to do, rather than having them as. And with regards to the slave trade, my point is ownership of another human being. Whether you took them over there to work in the fields, whether you took them as a quote unquote captive, well, they take them as a captive, just don't take them as a slave. So I'm only about the ownership part of it, as as property that you can trade off and so forth. So let's see if there's any comments while Stops is away for a moment there. Again, if you're a Muslim and you're listening and you want to join in, or indeed if you're a non-Muslim and you want to come and join us, the topic is atheism. Does the Quran show this? So if the Quran is true, atheism is false. If atheism is true, the Quran is false. Can the Quran show that atheism is false? I think that's a virtually impossible task, because you've got to show that it's your particular God that exists and no other God could exist. It's necessarily your God, i.e. Allah, that exists. And if Allah exists, then every other version of a God does not exist by the laws of logic. And I think that, you've got an uphill task. If you could show that this book was somehow miraculous and could only have come from Allah, that would be sort of evidence in your favor. But I think the more we read, the less we can see that this comes from Allah, and rather this was made up by men in the 7th or 8th century that were very ignorant of morality, of the world, etc. You could argue they were slightly better. Maybe you might have an argument which to say that the Quran is slightly better than what was already there by the pagans. I think you might have to cherry pick even then, but that might be an argument. But the moment a Muslim says that either the Quran or Muhammad is the example to follow for all people for all time, now we are in a position today to judge the 7th century, because you as a Muslim, or the Islamic claim is that it's a moral example for all time. So now, with the lens that we have today and our understanding of science, biology, neurology, how things affect human beings, etc., we can bring the standards of today to bear. And if the Quran is indeed a moral book, it will easily withstand that, because of course God is all powerful. He knows teachers. And when we look at the book, I don't think that that's the case. So there we go. Stops, if you're back, let me know. If not, I'm quite happy to read a few more comments. Let's just see if there's anything here. Again, if you're a Muslim and you want to join us, or indeed if you are not and you want to come and share a view on whether you think atheism is true, if you think it's false, and why. Do you think the Quran is true or false? Because if it is true, then obviously it would refute atheism. So happy to hear any views on this. Let's see if there's anybody that says that that differs from our view here. Is there anybody who's listening that thinks that atheism is false, or that the Quran is true? I mean, you might not be a Muslim and you might false. We could do that. We could sidestep a little bit if it was a Christian or some other believer of some sort. But particularly if you're a Muslim, do you? I guess the question answers itself. Do you think the Quran is true? The answer would be yes. Why do you think it's true? And then obviously if it is true, then that would show atheism to be false. So really then it would be for you to show us why you believe the Quran is true. We got to be very careful with the God of the gaps as well. So if you come along and say, well, hey, where did you come from? Well, I came from a mom and dad, right? In that sense. Well, where did they come from? Mom and dad, blah, 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 blah. Where did humans come from? They had a common ancestor. We go all the way back to the single cell. How did that get started? Well, we don't know. It could be abiogenesis. It could be panspermia. There could be other options for how long here on Earth. Great. Okay. Now we've answered up to there. Well, where did all of this stuff come from? And so, just shortcut this. If you're a Muslim, because that's the answer I would give you, just shortcut this. Well, then where did the universe come from? And at that point, I have to say, well, we don't know at this stage. Either the universe had a beginning. If it had a beginning, what sort of beginning did it have? If it didn't have a beginning, then it's eternal, and then God is not necessary for the creation of the universe. So either straight to there. So yeah, let's just see if there's any questions, comments on this. I think Stops might have stepped away for a short while there. Stops, when you're back, just unmute and let me know. Do you think there's anybody here is there any viewer or somebody in the comments that thinks true? And if you do, what do you think is the strongest reason for believing the Quran is true? That would be interesting, because if you can prove the Quran is true, then obviously that would be a case of showing that atheism is false. What I do notice with certain Muslims, not your average run-of-the-mill Muslim, but those that sort of try to study, I guess, I'll use that word loosely, is to challenge certain of the foundations of atheism, for example, naturalism, and say, well, how did consciousness get started? Or, where did morals come from, or whatever the case is. And there are answers to this. We're not claiming that we know it, but there are sufficient answers, if not necessary, certainly sufficient, meaning that there are plausible answers as to how this can come about in a naturalistic world. But we're not saying that, hey, we have the answer how it happened, but there's certainly responses there that I think are certainly coherent and have some plausibility, if not more probability, certain degree of probability of being the case. So you could go the route of attempting to undermine atheism. I think you've got a massive uphill struggle to show just in and of itself a particular version of atheism is false, and that's always possible. See that as being the case. There's enough philosophy to rebut any of those critiques, as far as I can aware. And if I'm not aware of one, I know some philosophers. I can ask them the question, and I'm sure, or I can look it up myself. So it's doubtful that you're going to disprove naturalistic atheism. But then there's versions of atheism where somebody could believe in some sort of spirit that is not a god, could still be an atheist. I have my own particular special version of atheism, which I will bring out of my holster in rare occasions for certain theists, particularly the presuppositionalists, and it's something I call dimensional atheism. So then I put it that there's a 10th dimension that exists, and everything is derivative of this 10th dimension. And it's simply a dimension. It doesn't have any consciousness, awareness, or anything. It's simply the ground of all reality. And I could profit that as an atheist, and I don't see any incoherence in that. So let's see. Is there anything else in terms of arguments against atheism that we often hear? So stops again when you're back, just let us know. Is there any other arguments? It's typically the moral argument, or it's an argument, hey, you atheists don't know X. Atheism is false. I mean, that's just, certain theists that are not well read or particularly knowledgeable. Just because we don't know something doesn't mean that quote unquote atheism is false. It just means that we don't have an answer. You would need to show that it would be impossible to answer X question, or to have something be the case under atheism to show that a particular version, as I say, of atheism is false. But again, it wouldn't be a defeater for all versions of atheism. Atheism is simply the view that you do not believe in a God or gods, or if you wish, you lack a belief in a God or gods. That's it. There are some entailments around that, obviously, that you couldn't have an objective morality that is based on a, quote, conscious creator, but you could argue for some version of objective morality based on some other criteria. I would suggest that once you accept that the well-being of conscious creatures is your standard, then from there we can label that objective, and from there we have a moral system. The argument is often, well, why should you choose the well-being of conscious creatures? And again, one could have a discussion. I don't think that I have a knockdown argument to say that this is the case, or that you should use reasons to suggest that that is the standard to use. But once you accept that, then we're off and running from there. Atheists are arsehole. Okay, well, I mean, obviously you can make that statement. Islam is the only true religion. Well, I mean, again, if you want to join the panel or give us reasons why you think that's the case, then we're interested to hear. I mean, if you just make sort of vacuous comments, then obviously seriously, and I'm going to presume that you're a bit of a troll. So again, if you're going to come here, Saeed, you're more than welcome. Again, give us reasons for why you say something, and then I'm going to take you seriously. If you just make vacuous statements, I'm going to take it that you don't really have an argument. You just have an emotional response, and that you can have, but that's not something that I'm going to entertain in an intellectual discussion. So emotion is part of an intellectual discussion. That's for the emotional table. Here we want to have a rational discussion at the rational table. So those two criteria are separate. I don't think they mix. So with that said, is there anything else? Is there anything else you as viewers have heard, especially if you're an atheist? What else have you heard, either from Muslims or indeed some other theist, that they put to you as a critique against atheism? Something that says, hey, I have something as a theist that you don't, or here's a problem with your worldview, let's call it, which undermines your worldview, and it can't be true, therefore you have to accept my worldview, or some worldview that doesn't include, or includes rather, a creator. If you've heard of anything like that, then by all means let me know. But certainly the moral argument is the one. And then, well, hey, the universe, how did that get started? Well, again, you as a theist are making the claim the universe had a beginning. You, again, have the burden to, I'm an agnostic on that. I don't know whether the universe had a beginning or whether it is eternal in some form. So I'm on the fence on, you're going to take a positive position, either that it had a beginning or that it's eternal, then you need to present the evidence for why you are persuaded one way or the other. I'm on the fence purely because the majority of cosmologists do not have a consensus on the ultimate origin, if there is one, of the universe. Most cosmologists accept the Big Bang, but what might have happened before, that is still undecided at this stage. There are many different cosmological models that are out there. I was lucky enough to go and listening to Sir Roger Penrose. His model postulates an eternal universe in the past and, eternal universe into the future. And again, it's quite complex in the mathematics and the theory, but it essentially says that the universe iterations of the universe with something like a big bang that goes out, expands out and eventually uses up the energy that then gets passed through, for want of a better word, and starts another version of the big bang. And that has been happening ad infinitum. And if that sounds silly, then you either don't understand it. I'm not saying that it's true. Letting it as a hypothesis, and he has the physics and so forth to put forward as an argument, and it hasn't been falsified as yet. So it is certainly a hypothesis that would still be in the running at this stage. If some observational or other evidence comes to the point where, we can rule out that, maybe we get to the point where we rule out an infinite universe in the past, and all the evidence we have shows the universe must have had some sort of a beginning, then I'm going to accept that. And now the question is, well, what is most likely that would have been the beginning? And no cosmological model, as far as I'm tell, or in speaking to Skydive Phil and others, postulates a God. They all postulate something that is not God. Now the theist will come back and say, well, that's philosophical naturalism, i.e. that you exclude a God. It's just impossible for a God to be involved. And I think there's some philosophical naturalists that just outright deny that it's even possible for a God to be involved. I'm of the methodological naturalist view, which is the same, which is the view that we don't include God in the hypothesis, but if God could be demonstrated, or there's some predictions that could be made that only a God, or that most likely would apply to a God, then that would become part of the running. So I don't rule a God out per se. The philosophical naturalist would rule that out under also. There's two versions of that view. Well, not my scholars, it's experts in the field. I don't study under them, so I wouldn't call them my scholars, but these are people who have expertise that are much more knowledgeable than all of us here combined times 10, or probably times a million, or their ideas that are based on physics, mathematics, observations, etc. And you're welcome to challenge them, and they have their own challenges. But to dismiss it because you don't understand it or because they have expertise, I think is unwise. So are cosmologists the authority in determining how the universe began and if it had a beginning or not? Yes, I would say cosmologists are the authority. They are the people that are most likely to give us an explanation one way or the other, unless you can suggest, I don't know who this gentleman is. He's got obviously an Arabic name there, so I'm not sure what that is. But are they the authority? Yes, I would say they are the authority, just like mathematicians are the authority on maths and how infinite sets work, etc. Just like evolutionary biologists are experts in evolution and biology. So yes, they are experts. They are the people most likely to give us explanations, hypotheses, and ultimately, hopefully, a model about the early universe. So the answer to that is yes. Repeat that, please. Repeat what? The answer to your question? Are cosmologists the authority? Yes, in terms of determining how a universe began. Speaking astronomers, theoretical physicists, so there's a group of people under the word cosmologist. Yes, they would be the authority in determining how that happened. They have access to all the information, the equations, the observations. I wouldn't expect an evolutionary biologist or a mathematician, just a normal mathematician, to have any say in that. That's not their area of expertise. So yes, experts and people most likely, obviously, to determine the best conclusions, hopefully, of whatever that field is. So again, stops if you're there, let us know. I think if there aren't any more questions, I'm not going to run this all night. If you're somebody that wants to join us, let us know in the chat. It's the there's the link. Again, it's you always get the odd troll here and there, so that's all fine. So again, if you're a Muslim and you want to join us and have a conversation for a while, hopefully Stops is still here. I'm still here at the moment for a while. I'm not going to be up all night. But again, the topic is atheism false, and does the Quran show this? And obviously at this point, our answer is no, atheism is not false, and certainly the Quran doesn't show that. I would argue the opposite. The Quran seems to show that it was compiled by men over some period of time that were very ignorant of just about everything that we understand today. A high school child knows more in many categories than any of the people in those days. And the Quran seems to show that. And in order for you to say the otherwise, you have to use all kinds of mental gymnastics to say, well, no, it doesn't really mean the earth is flat, or no, it really does appeal to embryology, or hey, it made this prediction precise. I've heard many of those things, and they're utterly unimpressive. And you've got to go with, something that is not a straightforward interpretation. And again, that gets you into the point of, well, if you can interpret the Quran in multiple ways, and they both have honest interpretations, and they can base them in some good reasons, now you have a problem. Surely God, in his infinite wisdom, can put forward a book that is so crystal clear that only one interpretation is or anywhere near reasonable. Anything else would be ridiculous. Nobody says that, hey, the verse about eating pork could be taken as, well, what, you could have pork if you fancy, or whatever the case is. There's strict rules around that. That's straightforward. Same with the inheritance, or whatever the case is. That error is straightforward, right? So that particular error in the Quran, I think, is my go-to error. If somebody says, show me an error in the Quran, I walk them through it. I did the other day. I give him credit. The Muslim said he'd go away and look at it. He came back and suggested a response that the Quran didn't say, which, again, I've heard most of the responses, so I was aware of that he's going to come back with something that's just not going to work. And, of course, that's exactly what he did. Wouldn't look at the Quran, wouldn't go through. He gave me an analogy of split up water, and I suggest to him, use something concrete, because then you'll see exactly how the Quran is in error. And he was unwilling to do so. So again, this is unfortunately what I see as the mindset, right? Which is, hey, we've got this conclusion. There cannot be an error. If you present me one, you must be mistaken. I will find some way to rationalize that. And that's very sad to see. And especially where it's irrefutable. Any sane person, if I gave that calculation in any other book, if I said that was in the Bible, maybe I'll start to do that. Maybe I'm going to put it to Muslims. Hey guys, I want you to have a look at this. Here's something that I found in a religious book, and I'm going to walk them through, not tell them it's in the Quran, and then let's see whether they agree. And then I'm sure if they don't recognize it already, they would agree. Yep, that's clearly a mistake. What book is that? Let me tell you. Right? Oh my word. That's another way. There I can, because otherwise I'm saying there's an error in the Quran, right? I'm now priming their brain to go, there's something. They're automatically resistant. They're automatically going, no, it can't be. You must be mistaken. And people have said this to me direct. You're mistaken. It cannot be the case. There will be an answer out there. I mean, that is the epitome of non-critical thinking. There is an answer. You just don't know. It can't be. Okay. You can make that claim if you like. Somebody's trying to get my attention there. Easy Rob. Is there a question there for me? If there is, then just make it at Rob or something like that so I can see it. What are the methods in determining these things that you've mentioned? Observations, if you're still talking about cosmology, then the gentleman with the Arabic name. Observations, mathematical equations that have hypotheses built in that can be falsified or confirmed, that sort of thing. That's how they do it. Again, something like Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, or Sean Carroll's book, The Big Picture, are two excellent books. I would suggest The Big Picture is probably the first book I would go with. If you want a grounding on how Bayesian reasoning works, how there's a bit of philosophy in there, because he's a poetic naturalist. So he makes an argument for that view, incorporates quantum mechanics, cosmology. He covers quite a wide range. But if you just want to understand a little bit of the history of the universe, how we come to know what we know about the universe today, then Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, is good. Don't be put off by the title. Even if you don't believe the universe came from nothing, he has a special definition of what he means by nothing. It's still worthwhile learning about how we came to understand that the universe was in a static state and it's no longer the case. That's what people believed up until 1925, and he goes through that. So then you will see he will appeal to all the people that have made discoveries that have helped us to understand what we know about the universe today. So that would be the book, A Universe from Nothing. Hopefully I've answered the question there. So yeah, if you say at Speakers Corner UK, then I would be able to pick that up. I was mentioning the debate, and it just comes to me now. It's somebody by the name of Kelly, and I just want to see if I can find it. Here it is. It's called Shelley Keegan. I'm going to give you the video. So this is a video very much worth watching. Let me just see if I can share it quickly with you. Where's the share button? Here we go. I'm going to share this with you. I mentioned for those who just joined us, I mentioned a video around morality, life purpose, etc., with William Lane Craig. He's quite a well-known Christian philosopher. Many Christians think he's the best debater on the Christian side. And here is a link to a debate that he had with a guy called Shelley Keegan. Shelley Keegan, he's an atheist, and they had a discussion on morals. And the interesting part was the discussion they had between each other. So they sat and had half an hour, whatever it was, talking to each other. And this was really enlightening. Often allow himself to speak one-on-one. So this was a rare opportunity to see him conversing with another philosopher at his level, where it's not just a prepared speech, or it's not just somebody standing at a podium where you can't cross-question them. And I think that was a very good debate to watch, where Keegan challenged Craig on his moral views and so forth about certain things, and pointed out that, because Craig made the argument, well, there's a cosmic purpose. If there isn't a cosmic purpose, there's no purpose. And that's not true. If there isn't a cosmic purpose for life, that doesn't mean we can't have a purpose that we give ourselves for life. So one doesn't equate the other. So worthwhile watching if you want to see sort of two high-level debaters, that sort of a topic. It's there in the chat there for you. So the gentleman with the Islamic name is asking, are there any fellow Muslims in the chat? I'm not sure. If you are, then speak up. If not, that's fine as well. Stops, if you are there, just let us know. Otherwise, if there's no further questions, hopefully that's been interesting and useful. You might want to play some of it back, listen again. Again, please subscribe to the channel Speakers Corner UK. We might do random streams every now and again. I pop onto other Hangouts as well, because they run it more regularly, so I don't often have the chance to host my own one. It's more popular than mine anyway. So something like Velevision, V-E-L-L-E. If you type that into YouTube, you will find a channel that does Hangouts almost every day. Sometimes it's black issues, sometimes it's social, political. It's a group primarily of atheists. So oftentimes religion comes up. So if you're interested, Velevision, G Block, it's a group over here. I've met some of them from Speakers Corner, a good bunch of lads. Obviously, they are predominantly atheists, but they give theists the floor. They allow them to speak. Sometimes it's passionate, sometimes there's a bit of over talking, but generally it's a well-behaved and it's an interesting topic, and you'll get a variety of characters coming on and having discussions. So with that said, unless there's any other questions, I do thank you so much that we got a chance to do a random hangout in again with my friend Stops. Stops, if you're there, thank you so much for joining me. If not, we'll end the hangout now. We will be doing Gin and Tonic again. Please look out, subscribe to the Gin and Tonic Show, J-I-N-N. Let me just put it in the chat. Gin and Tonic is the name. That is a show that runs every Friday, 8 p.m. UK time. It'll be starting in early February again. We took a break at the end of December last year, and that focused specifically on critiquing Islam itself, not the people necessarily. We don't think that all Muslims are bad people, and in fact, we think most Muslims are better than their book. So what we do look at is the book itself and critique this book, rather than all Muslims, because many Muslims I've spoken to do not know the Quran, or don't accept certain things in the Quran, or try to rationalize it away. So we put aside what they say, and we look directly at the text. What does the text say? How was it understood at that time through the tafsirs and the corpus, which is the direct translation, and see what can we make of this book, because the claims are extraordinary that this is the book of God. Does the book itself, when it's scrutinized by non-Muslims who are doing our best to use critical thinking, stand up to that claim? And that's what we do. We also talk about we have guests on. So Friday, UK, 8 p.m., the Gin and Tonic Show. And with that, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this particular hangout. Again, give us a few likes. Let us know in the comments if you like it. comment afterwards. If you'd like to see Hangouts again, we can do it. Unfortunately, it'll be random. I don't have a specific day, and I'm not going to commit to weekly Hangouts or anything, but if there's any topics, ideally, we normally talk about religion and Islam in particular. So if it's not on the Gin and Tonic Show and you just want a random hangout, drop us a note. Let us know if there's any topics you'd like us to discuss. And especially if there's any Muslims that want to have a discussion, then we always like to do that. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Thanks very much again to Stops. He might have stepped away. And I'm sure we'll speak again at some point. Good night, and God bless to those who believe in God, and just bless everybody else, and hope you are well and take care of yourselves. Good night.